Thank you. Please be seated. Prefect joke of the day is, what do you call a denim expert? A genius.
Genius. Good morning, everyone. Happy Jeans Day. Is there anybody named Gene in the school? I was trying to think. Mr. Rousseau, but anybody else? I don't think there are any. Well, I hope you're all enjoying wearing your jeans. It's just so much fun, isn't it? So we're going to begin with hymn number 3, the Duxbury Hymn. I vow to thee, my country. Please stand. Quietly, please. Thank you. Please be seated. So things do change. The ancient Greeks were kind of taken up with this idea of the question of how things can change when they actually seem to remain the same. And so they got into camp. Some Greeks believed that, change was an illusion, that nothing ever changes. Parmenides and his friend Zeno, for instance. And others, like Heraclitus, believed that everything was changing all the time, that change was the only constant. He was famous for saying you can never step into the same river twice, because, of course, the river continues to flow. So sometimes it's a good thing when things change, and change makes us happy. Sometimes we resist change and don't appreciate it, but, whether we like it or not, change happens. And sometimes, of course, we get impatient for change. We see this particularly in politics. The old expression about politics is the more things change, the more they seem to stay the same. And sometimes that's frustrating. We just think, why can't things change for the better? But things do change. And the world that I grew up in, for instance, is very different from the world that you are growing up in. And the world, when you're my age, the world will be a very, very different place than it is now, of course. So here's a little example from my life about change. And this is kind of a political example as well. When I was a graduate student in Toronto, I had a good friend who was very active in promoting gay rights. And one day he invited me to a march. So, it was a nice day. I always liked a good march, so I was happy to join him. And the march turned out to be a protest against what had just happened that spring. A number of gay men had been arrested in Toronto. In the early 1980s, it was a crime to be homosexual. So the march was small and relatively tame. And I remember very clearly that all along the route were policemen with cameras of all sorts taking pictures and films of the marchers. They were not happy about the march. They weren't happy that the city had given the marchers a license, and they were out in force to show their unhappiness. And I remember it felt kind of a little bit sinister and intimidating. So by the year 2000, that protest march, which happened every year, had morphed into the Gay Pride Parade. And the police, of course, had their own float in the parade. So, 20 years seems like a long time. It's not really a long time, and things can change a lot in 2 decades. So not everyone agrees that the political and cultural changes we're experiencing and have experienced are all positive things. I don't think they're all positive. But what is clear is that change doesn't happen in a vacuum, and that citizen involvement has always had an effect on the shape that change takes in society. And with all due respect to Parmenides, things are going to change whether or not we do anything about it. So the question is, to what degree do we want to have some influence? Or do we just want to leave change to the people who may or may not disagree with the changes that we would like to see? So I'm going to call up Mia Liang to talk about the thinking and acting that she has done in this regard in terms of looking at how to change society, and in particular around one issue that I know that you all have been thinking a lot about. Mia.
How much is a human life worth? $1 million? $1 billion? What about a child's life? A child with everything still ahead of them and the world at their feet? In my mind, these things are priceless, but my country's government would seem to disagree. I was born and raised in California, and I'm proud of where I come from. We invented the internet, made blockbusters, and have some pretty great weather. But as of late, some concerning things have been happening in California and across the country. From Columbine to Sandy Hook to San Bernardino to Parkland, America is plagued by mass shootings. 3 of the 4 incidents I mentioned were at schools. It's easy to rattle off facts about gun violence. According to the National Institute of Justice in the U.S., there are around 310 million guns available to civilians. The Pew Center reports that America has the highest number of guns per home in the world. There are more mass shootings in the U.S. than anywhere else. But what do these statistics mean? This means that there are almost as many guns as citizens. This means that even people in warring countries are likely to own fewer guns than Americans. This means that too many people are dying for no reason. But despite the thousands of innocents that have been slaughtered needlessly, our Congress continues to do nothing. The National Rifle Association exerts a large amount of influence over politicians due to its deep pockets, and as long as financially motivated politics predominate, much of the response to mass shootings has been driven by private citizens. Some businesses, such as Dick's Sporting Goods, Walmart, and REI, have stopped or changed policies on selling guns or gun-related merchandise. Many other companies have withdrawn their support of the NRA and its affiliates. But the biggest group of activists are found in schools just like ours, just like the ones targeted by gun violence. Something is stirring in the hearts of students, something a lot like rage. Teenagers have been leading the charge to fight for our lives and the lives of our fellow human beings. This will be our generation's battle, a hallmark of youth activism that will undoubtedly continue until the problem is fixed. To so many students, adults and government have failed to keep schools safe. To so many students, they're the only ones who can actually make a difference. Over spring break, I was fortunate enough to attend the March for Our Lives with my mother, a lifelong educator. And while there was certainly a mournful aspect to the march, the overwhelming emotion was anger. Anger because students feel unsafe in their classrooms. Anger at Congress's continued and willful inaction. Anger that parents have no guarantees that their babies will come home safely. I'm not here today to argue about what the proper solution to gun violence is, but here are a few options to consider. Educate yourself. The more we know about gun violence and politics, the more power and respect we command. Talk about it. It's impossible, not to mention irresponsible, to ignore a conversation being held on such a global scale. Exercise your right to vote. In democratic countries, this is an inalienable right. But really, voting is a privilege. It is the privilege to have your voice heard and counted. It's not right for my 14-year-old brother to have to be taught what to do in case of a shooting. It's not right that my 15-year-old cousin was evacuated from her school from a threat of a shooting. It's not right that my mom, who I don't think can even shoot a Nerf gun, is being told by the president to own a gun and defend her students. In a free, developed country, people should not live in fear of being gunned down while trying to obtain an education. No one should have to look over their shoulder constantly due to a government that refuses to take responsible action. People are dying, being massacred. So now I bring you back to my initial question. How much is a child's life worth? Is it worth anything? Isn't it worth everything?
Thank you, Mia. I'm listening to you thinking that it's obviously takes a lot of courage to get up and talk to the school and this about these kind of issues. But I also felt like you were kind of giving voice to a lot of what people have been thinking about lately, and how some issues can cause us either to kind of despair and just give up, or to kind of begin to take action and begin to think about them in a different way. So thank you for giving voice to, I think, what a lot of us have been thinking about. Our final hymn is hymn number 18, He Who Would Valiant Be. Please stand. Thank you all. If what Mia has said this morning has struck a chord, I know that she'd love to talk to you if you're interested in talking more about this issue and what can be done. So thank you again, Mia. Thank you all. Have a great day.